may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Good morning, Bears fans, barflies, and followers from around the world. I consider this the very first show of the football season. As soon as the guys show up for camp, that's when I start to believe that, all right, all of this other nonsense we've been talking about before, now we can talk about football. And Gabriel Talks Football is going to lead us off. But also, as the days and weeks come along, we're going to be adding more and more programming focused on the Chicago Bears. We're going to have tons of programming. We're gearing up for 20 hours of fresh programming every week on the Chicago Bears here on the Barroom Network. My name is Aldo Gandia. Let me bring in the man of the hour. Great, Gabriel. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. I'm doing real good. I'll tell you, first day of camp. Know what I think about first day of camp? First day of grinding. Because you all of a sudden now you're back to in the office at 7.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you get to drive home about 9.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's long days, and these long days go all the way until the draft. So it's the beginning of a long season from front office point of view.
Yeah, and I saw your article over at Windy City Gridiron. You talked about being a scout, and one of the first things you wrote about was the sacrifice that it takes to be a scout. And that goes along with anyone in the professional football world. You know, the amount of time you've got to invest to being good at your job. And if you don't invest it, you're going to get beat out by guys who do, right?
Yeah, well, I wrote in that article, and I purposely put it in there. You know, not even a week after I came here, we were down 2 scouts, so I had to hire 2 right away. And I interviewed Chris Ballard and Ted Monago, who I ended up hiring. But during all, the first interviews were all done via the phone. And I talked to them for great length, like over an hour each time. But I spent my time trying to talk them out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, number one, I wanted to see how much they wanted it. But number 2, I wanted them to know beforehand, before they signed on the dotted line, that this ain't easy. Okay, you can be glamorous in the eyes of fans and in the public because you're working for an NFL team. But forget about going to kids' baseball games, football games, basketball games, dance recitals. I missed the birth of both of my daughters, not because I wanted to.
Yeah.
I couldn't get home fast enough. I mean, my ex calls me up at 4:30. She goes, I'm going into labor. I'm in Lansing, Michigan. So I had to drive to Detroit, and the airport's only an hour and 15 minutes. But the very first flight out was 7 o'clock in the morning.
Jeez.
And so, but I got on that flight. It's an hour flight to Buffalo. By the time I landed, I mean, she already had baby. And it's not like I said, it's not like I didn't try to get there.
Yeah,
and the other one was Kelsey was born premature. She was like 7 weeks premature. And I was up in northern Michigan. I was in Marquette, Michigan in the middle of October. So I get the call. I go, oh, shit. And now you can't get a flight out of Marquette after about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm getting a call at 9 o'clock at night.
Oh, man.
So, and the only flights they have going in and out of Marquette are puddle jumpers.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a rental car, and I'm thinking, what the hell am I going to do? And I'm looking at a map. I go, I guess the best way to do it is drive to Milwaukee. That was the fastest way. It's actually go down Route 41. Route 41, goes all the way up through Marquette.
Sure.
So that's what I did. That was a 425-mile drive. And I was praying for a cop to stop me.
That way you get an escort, right?
Yeah, like maybe I can get there faster. Never saw one. And I was speeding the whole way. But anyway, I mean, I didn't get home. First of all, I'm worried because there's danger of her being, 7 weeks premature.
Yeah.
I mean, she was less than 3 pounds when she was born.
Wow.
And so I'm worried about that. I'm praying like a son of a gun in the car. And, I'm Catholic. So I'm saying rosary after rosary after rosary. That's probably keeping me awake. And I have to, the first flight I got out of Milwaukee, and there wasn't a direct flight from Milwaukee into Buffalo. I had to fly Milwaukee, Detroit. So I ended up getting a flight like at 5 in the morning 4:30 in the morning out of Milwaukee. That connects me to Detroit to that 7 o'clock flight I was on for Friday before. So I get home. I mean, in the meantime, they had to do an emergency C-section. The baby was born before midnight.
Yeah. Wow.
You miss important things, and that's just, sometimes it can't be helped. You don't plan on it, but, when a baby wants to come, a baby wants to come. It doesn't matter where the hell you are.
Yeah. And then you've got to have, a spouse who is understanding of the complexities of the job and the demands of the job and so forth, and other family members. It's huge.
That's why I say it was my ex-wife. That obviously, caused. No, it's all right. That caused problems.
Yeah.
So, but another story, and again, I was relating all these stories to Chris and Teddy. My daughter was a pretty good basketball player in high school. I mean, she wasn't like a D1 prospect because she wasn't tall enough, but she was a D2, D3 type prospect. Good shooter, good handler, real good defensive player, real tenacious on defense. So, basketball season is right in the heart of scouting season. You got combine, all-star games, all this other stuff. So I don't see her to junior year. I don't see her play at all. So get in the playoff game. Can you get to the game? I'll get to the game. So I get a flight home. I just told Jerry, I'm going home. I got to see my daughter play. It's a playoff game. So, and he said, fine. So I go home, get there. It was at Niagara University. She has 3 fouls in the first half on her. And so they got to pull her. And then they pull her out for the rest of the first half. They put her in the beginning, and she's just playing so hard, probably playing hard to try to impress me. She fouls 2 more times, fouls out of the game. Just destroyed her. Oh, no. So it's little things like that.
Yeah.
People don't understand that that's gonna happen to you, and at the same time, you've got a job to do, and they're paying you pretty darn good money to do it, and so you can't just take off whenever you want. Now since that happened, there's different laws. There's maternity laws and maternity leave and things like that. But I don't know if maternity leave would even work in the NFL, especially in the personnel business. They may say, yeah, you can take your maternity leave, but next year you'll have another job.
Yeah. Thank you for the compliment, Randy. But yeah, it takes a special kind of a person to be able to handle the job of scouting, working in the NFL, the hours and so forth. And then that support system for that person is got to be in tuned and accepting of the complexities of the job. I know our buddy Jeff Willis is here, has been contemplating moving into the scouting profession. So hopefully this chat has helped him. All right, let's talk about the breaking news that happened just minutes before we went online here, and thanks to Creighton for pointing it out. So I was able to pull Adam Schefter's report on Twitter. I don't know if it's called Twitter anymore, by the way, but another deal. Bears and tight end Cole Kmet reached agreement on a 4-year, $50 million extension, including $32.8 million guaranteed. That is, of course, is the big thing here. $32.8 million guaranteed and $20 million in new first-year cash per me and Field Yates. So, Greg, can you please explain to me what this means, first-year cash? And then also, is Cole Kmet worth $32.8 million guaranteed?
Well, the guarantee is the guarantee. What it comes down to is the contract's $12.5 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is very fair. Very fair. I don't think there's one iota of they paid him too much. It's a very fair deal. It's a player on the come. The new cash, that's a signing bonus.
Okay.
It's the cash he's going to see in the first year of the contract.
That's just another way of putting it.
Yeah.
Instead of bonus. Yeah. Gotcha. Well, it's to me, it's thrilling news, Greg, because I really do believe in Cole Kmet. A lot of fans have been upset because they thought that he was going to be in 100-yard pass catcher. And I know you've talked about this a number of times.
Go one more time.
Yes. I was going to ask you to.
Because I was reading some stuff the other day, and they said, well, they don't have to re-sign. In fact, somebody was saying on Twitter, they don't have to re-sign Cole Kmet. They could take Bowers from Georgia in the first round. First of all, they're not going to take a tight end in the first round. I can guarantee you they're taking an edge, but we'll get to that in a little while.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't, Bowers and Kmet don't play the same position. And this is what people don't understand. There is 2 tight end positions. And the league should separate them. They don't. And actually, for pay, they should separate them.
Yes.
But they don't. They blend them together. You got a wide tight end. That's what Cole Kmet is. And then you got a move tight end. Now, the move tight end could be a Y, or not a Y. It could be an H. Could be an F. Well, however the team's offense wants to call that particular player. But in essence, he's a move tight end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the traits you're looking for from those 2 players are entirely different.
Right.
The move tight end is more of like a big giant size wide receiver, not a guy like Kmet who lines up at the end of the line of scrimmage, and an important part of his job is blocking. Yeah, does the move guy got to block? Yeah, he's got to block, but he's blocking on the move. He's got a running start. Very seldom is he lined up in tight like Kmet. There are plays that they do it, but it's seldom when you look at the total play counts that they're in. And you look at, they signed Robert Tonyan to be the move tight end this year, who played with Green Bay. He's 240 pounds, an entirely different frame, different shape. He ran like a 4.58 when he was coming out of Indiana State. Different type of player, and people just want to keep bunching them together, and you can't.
Right.
If you want to call it tight end A, tight end B, do it that. But they are totally separate positions.
Yeah, and that's not to say that on certain plays, Cole Kmet won't play that that move tight end position. Because they want guys to be versatile. They want to keep the defense guessing. Who's the Y? Who's this? Who's that? They want to make it complex. But for the most part, Cole Kmet is a blocking inline tight end who can pass catch. That's probably a very simple way to put it for fans to truly understand. I get upset, now when fans complain that he dropped the pass and so forth, I understand that. Those are legitimate complaints. But if you're looking at the stat line on a game where he was asked to pass block 90% of the time because the opposing team's pass rush was so strong, you need to account for that if he's got a stat line of only 2 catches for 13 yards or something like that. So it takes some, studying to really evaluate Cole Kmet. I see that Don Burr, our resident Detroit Lions nemesis fan here, he's saying this is a terrible deal. It's taken him too long to develop and blah, blah, blah.
Why? Don, sorry, but that's a ridiculous statement. Totally ridiculous statement. He first year, I don't get it with Nagy going back because when guys are ready to play, he didn't play them. You can say that about Justin Fields. You can say it about Cole Kmet. You know, he had to play Jimmy Graham or whatever. And Jimmy Graham was a move tight end. So his numbers that year weren't that good. The second year, they went up to 60 catches.
That's right.
Which, you know, for a tight end, and don't compare him to a move tight end who's catching 75 or 80.
Yep,
because that's not his job. It has nothing to do with development. Kittle cannot do what Cole Kmet does.
Very.
Kittle does.
That is fascinating that you put that. Say that again.
Kittle cannot do what Cole Kmet does. And Cole Kmet can't do what Kittle does. Why? They play two separate positions.
Love it. Love it. And while we're on the topic, you know, the running backs, somebody posted on Twitter, you know, running backs are probably, you know, upset that they're seeing Cole Kmet being signed for this kind of money. And then you said, you know, the NFL should probably differentiate between the tight ends for salary purposes and other purposes. I think the same thing can be said about the running back position, because you've got some running backs who are, in terms of total yards, lead the league because they're pass catchers and running backs. And that should be its own special position now, don't you think?
No, that part I disagree with you.
Okay.
I mean, running back is a running back. Looks like a running back, smells like a running back, is a running back. Okay. Here's the thing with running backs, and history has proven this. And the Bears roster's full of them. You can get damn good running backs on day 3. And it happens all the time. You can get damn good running backs as an undrafted free agent. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
And seldom now, there's a few like Henry down in Tennessee that are real bell cows. The guy who used to run for 1,500 yards and carry the ball 20, 25 times a game.
Right.
They don't want to do that. One of the reasons is a running back has a very short shelf life.
Yep. Those
legs are only taking so many hits. And you don't know what it is. And if you look, when a running back starts to go downhill, like an offensive tackle, a wide receiver, even a defensive lineman, when they start going downhill, it's a very gradual decline. And a lot of times, you know, the coaches will see it, but the fans won't see it. Okay, with a running back, it's like falling off a cliff. Boom! Yeah. He can be great one year and totally awful the next year. Because once you lose a little something in your legs, it's all over.
Yeah.
And so between that and teams using 2 and 3 backs in the system now, you know, running back by committee, and you try to mix up the skill set. So there's a complement between player A and player B and maybe player C. They all got different strong points. And that, in essence, helps the offense. But at the same time, because you don't have the guy that has that play every down type ability, they don't deserve to get paid that way.
Yeah.
You know, and you look how many running backs end up hitting a home run in a second contract. I'm going to tell you the guy, and I was shocked at the money he got. You know what the highest paid second contract was this year in free agency?
No.
Montgomery.
Oh, really?
That shocked me.
Wow.
And the guy that he replaced in Detroit, who's a pretty damn good running back, he got less than half of what Monty got.
Wow.
In New Orleans.
I'm shocked by that. But here's my point regarding running backs and salaries. Take a look at, these are the total yards leader. I know this type is very small, but
yeah, I get it.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs,
old eyes here.
Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey were the top 3 total yards getters in the NFL. Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, 2 wide receivers followed. Then Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler, Raheem Mostert, Isaiah Pacheco, Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams. So you've got 3 wide receivers in the top 11 total yards getters, and these guys are being vastly underpaid in comparison to what wide receivers are now getting.
True, but again, like I say, Isaiah Pacheco's in there. He's a 7th-round pick. It goes back. What's he going to be like 4 years from now? Okay, it's the wear and the tear. It used to be a hot position. Okay, the year we took Sid Benson, which was 2006. No, 2005.
Okay.
And 3 running backs went in the top 5. Do you see that happen again?
No.
One time since then, and that was almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Have 3 running backs gone high, and I think that was like 3 years later. And it's their, you call it value of the position. The value of the position has gone down. And it's not that the guy's not a talented player. Like, Saquon Barkley is a talented player, but don't forget, Saquon Barkley also had a torn ACL and missed a shitload of time over a 2-year period. And that's why, because when you get that catastrophic injury, now he came back well, but it took him his 2nd year back to really even look close to what he was before the injury.
Yeah.
And, who knows with a running back if he's ever going to be the same player. So that's what it's all about. I get it. Is it fair? Probably not. But it is what it is, and it ain't changing.
It's not. Jeff Willis, back to the Cole Kmet topic, wants to know, Greg, do you see Kmet's extension as tied to his production so far, how they expect him to continue to extend, or a combination thereof?
Combination.
Yeah.
They like what they've seen. They like the person. They like his football character. They like his leadership in the locker room. He is a huge help to the ground game, which is a big part of this offense. And he gets better every year as a pass receiver. He's a freaking load to bring down now. You could bring him, put a highlight tape of him last year with some of those catches he had. Some of them reminded me, we had Mark Bavaro when I was with the Giants. We drafted in 1985. And he's got a little Bavaro to him.
He does. Mike Ibsen asks.
Ironically, the same school, Notre Dame.
Oh, look at that. Mike asks, I always thought that Kmet should model his game after Jason Witten. People talking about Kelsey or these faster tight ends. That's crazy, as Greg has been saying. Witten was super effective for a long time in this league. I think Mike makes a good point there. What do you think?
Well, it's a good point, but in fairness, and I'm not, I guess I'm arguing the point a little bit different era. Granted, Witten has only been out of the league a few years. He's got out for a year, went back, and then retired again. But when he started out, the move tight end wasn't a big deal, which now it is.
Right.
Okay, so, and he was like a combo of the two. And, I'd have to go back and look at Witten's numbers, what they were. I'm talking height, weight, speed type numbers. What he was athletically. I don't recall what they were. But he played in the league a long time. So, I mean, we're talking a guy that was drafted, 2005, somewhere along in that area. You could look it up if you want, but it was a while ago because he played about 15 freaking years.
Yeah, he was a tough SOB. There's no doubt about it. A lot of people are now wondering about Darnell Mooney. And so Lee asked, now that Komet got paid, do you think Mooney gets his back? That is kind of a conundrum, for lack of a better word, that Ryan Pace is facing, because he's probably not
Ryan Pace.
Excuse me. I did it again. He's probably not going to pay Chase Claypool and Darnell Mooney. Probably.
I can't answer that. Who knows?
Yeah.
And I think they like him. Justin Fields loves him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, he does.
But they also drafted a clone, so to speak, in Scott.
Yep.
Okay. And the Claypool's up for an extension too, because he's going into his final year of the contract. And so is Jalen Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
So there's people they got to take care of. They got the money to do it. Excuse me. We'll just have to see how it works out.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna like in Mooney's case, and I'm throwing a dart at the wall here. He got hurt. I'm sure they want to see exactly how he comes back. And now, when you've got Claypool playing the X and DJ Moore playing the Z position, Mooney's going to be more of your slot guy.
Mm-hmm.
What's his production going to be?
Mm-hmm.
Versus the other two. You would think in that offense, if you use Green Bay, and that's where Getsy came from, Adams was the Z wide receiver. And the X wide receiver was always a big guy. You had Valdez-Scantling, and what the hell's the other guy's name from Iowa State, who just went to the Jets. They had him, big 6'5" guys like Komet is playing the X position. They could block. They were athletic, but it's a totally different kind of guy. You want that Z guy to use Ryan Pohl's term. They want a separator. They want the route runner who consistently gets separation. Now, Mooney can do that, but he's not as big. DJ Moore's a lot bigger than Mooney is. DJ Moore's 210 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Nick reminds us it's Lazard.
Lazard. But if you look at Valdez-Scantling, Lazard, the people that were before them playing that X position for Green Bay, it's Chase Claypool. That's why they went out and traded for Chase Claypool, because you had to have that big guy to play the X. That's what they're looking for. We go back, we talk about profiles for positions.
Yep.
That's the profile for the position in this particular offense.
Bear Truth 9 has a great question here. That bonus money, that $20 million, when does that take into effect? Is that this year or next year?
Probably have a check in 5 days.
Holy cow!
I mean, when you get a signing bonus, you get that check right away.
Right away. So
okay, now I'll clarify that.
Okay.
You get the check after the contract clears the league office.
Gotcha.
So the contract goes in, and once the league office approves the contract, then you get paid your bonus money. Unless there's something they call paragraph 5, unless there's something written in it that the bonus will be paid X amount a day. But usually it's a signing bonus. Now, so you get that money now. It's spread out over the extension. It's really spread out over part of this year and the next 4 years, because he's in the final year of his contract. So it's like the contract that Herbert got yesterday. They're making it sound like it's a 5-year contract. No, it wasn't. It was a 7-year contract, because he had this year the option for next year that they pick up, and then 5 more years.
Oh, okay.
That's so it was the addition. It was the additional 5, but he got some new money this year from the signing bonus.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are wondering now, if it's not Mooney, who could next see an extension? Do you think that Jalen Johnson, the cornerback, might be on the table here for an extension soon?
I'll be honest. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's how they feel about each individual player and
Yep.
his importance to the team. Now, to look at it from the contrary side on Jalen, he's drafted 2 corners in the second round. Now, granted, one to be a slot corner, and the other one to be outside. But you better have 2 good outside corners.
Indeed.
And, so I would think they'd want to keep Jalen. Do they want to keep him at the same money that Diggs got yesterday? I'd say not even close. And the reason being is look up what's Jalen Johnson's total interception total. I know what Diggs is at 17.
Right. Yeah, I think it's 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah, so he doesn't have the pick numbers. Now, obviously, the agent's going to want it, and he's going to deserve money, but I don't think he's going to get that kind of money.
Yeah, and Jalen was drafted before Diggs, and so that's probably
they're in the same draft, and the difference is like 8 picks,
2 or 3, yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So, it's going to be a fascinating thing. I think my guess, Greg, is that they're not going to try to re-sign Jalen until late in the season, if at all. They might want him to test free agency to see what his market value is.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, it's going to depend on what the corner class is.
Yeah, yeah.
If the corner class isn't strong, he's going to get paid. It's real simple.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting to follow. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit more next week. I'll do some research on what the cornerback class, free agency corners are going to look like. Not
necessarily free agency, but what's
the draft.
Out in the draft.
Yes.
And it's really too early to say. Excuse me. I told you I'm having a problem with my lungs this week.
Yeah, air quality is awful, so that's why.
Anyway. That free agency is going to have something to do with it. The draft is going to have something to do with it. But he's a young player. Don't forget, he's like a 20-year-old rookie or a 21-year-old rookie. He's still young. And so he's going to get paid. It's, could end up, you could do what the Bears did with Kyle Fuller and put a transition tag on him with the full intention of matching that transition tag. And players hate being tagged because even though it's guaranteed, the day they sign the contract, it's guaranteed. Even if you get hurt the first game, you're getting paid every penny. But even if you get cut, you're getting paid every penny. It's guaranteed, totally guaranteed. But they want that signing bonus. And so they want the multi-year deal.
Want that money. John asked a great question. This is something that I've been talking about and thinking about for quite some time. He asked you, when the front office is looking at cap space, how many years are those capologists looking ahead? So are they planning for, okay, this is probably what the salary cap is going to look like in 2024, 2025, 2026. Here's our obligations in terms of salary through those years and so forth. How far ahead are they looking to plan the roster?
It's a good question, and I'm not a cap guru. I know a little. I know enough to be dangerous. But there is, every December, there's a league meeting. It's almost always in Dallas. And part of that meeting is all the salary cap people, contract negotiators, are at the meeting. They're having their own meeting. And the league management council is working with them, and they're giving them what they project to be the cap for the following year, and then another couple of years going out based on what they anticipate, what the revenues are. Generally, it's always a little bit more. They're a little bit conservative with their outlook, but the teams have a pretty good idea of what the numbers are going to be next year, the year after, and the year after. So at least 3 years out.
Outstanding. All right. Triple R wants to know, Greg, why don't you try switching from flower marijuana to edibles to help your lungs? Go ahead. Flip them.
I wouldn't attempt to smoke anything. Okay, I got to explain this. And I don't know where I got it, but when I came back from DC, and
with the XFL,
yes, in March of 2020, I had a cough, and at that time, everybody thought, "Oh, COVID." It wasn't COVID, and I was tested probably a half a dozen times. And it got progressively worse. So this is before we started doing our show by a few months.
Okay.
But, I saw different doctors. My doctor was the Bears internist is, he was like the lead guy. He would send me to different specialists. They couldn't find out what the hell it was. And finally, I had this procedure done where they took fluid out of my lungs and, examined it. And I had a rare bacteria infection in my lungs. And how it got there, I don't know. I got my suspicions, but I don't know. But it's never going away.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay, so it's there. I'm on an antibiotic for the rest of my life, but there's times in like the last couple of weeks, it just gets worse, it just, I struggle with it, I guess is the best way of putting it, because I'm coughing more. I got a shortness of breath. I'm still going to the gym every day, but I can't do cardio like I used to do cardio.
Yeah.
So I struggle doing that, but hey, like the money for the running backs, it is what it is. I'm alive. I can do what I want to do. Some days it's a little harder than other days, but licorice tea. Are you freaking kidding? First of all, I don't like tea, but
do you like licorice?
No, it actually helps a little bit. Like a shot of whiskey. Around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock.
Now you're talking my language.
Preferably bourbon. I haven't tried scotch to see if that.
Yeah, stick with the bourbon.
Cough medicine.
Evie says she really is not kidding at all. Licorice tea is great for the lungs. You should give it a try. It's probably going to taste good.
I don't know. I don't
if
like
it's licorice.
Period. Yeah, I mean, I like licorice, but black licorice tastes different than cherry licorice. I had the cherry, but
yeah. And Evie tells us that the Bears are at press conference is going to start not too far from now. So I want to get this in before we lose some of our viewers to the press conference. Although you should just stay with us. We're going to be much more entertaining than bringing out.
It's on. I watch the press conferences after they're over, so I can keep repeating stuff I want to hear.
Yeah, exactly. And fast forward.
They're on Twitter and 5 minutes after it's over, you can get the whole thing. And if you want to hear something over, you just slide it back a little bit.
And we'll cover it all tomorrow night on the the Dan and Aldo show. But I want to get to yesterday's press conference. Ryan Poles made an appearance, and it's always interesting to hear him. And I got to tell you, first of all, he looked much more relaxed and comfortable talking to the media than in previous
Probably
times.
Sleep in the office, right?
That's right. Probably got a good night's sleep. I think he's just getting comfortable with the job and that part of presenting to the media. And so a great question here was asked. I forgot the name of the reporter, but he asked, what are expectations for yourself, Ryan Poles, in 2023? And his answer here is one that all Bears fans should memorize.
Yeah, I think that's sticking to the plan. When you look at the big picture, building through the draft, supplementing through free agency, I think making sure that your decisions that you're making are sound for where we are right now, and not putting us in a situation where it damages some of the work that we've done and the path that we've kind of set up for ourselves moving forward. So really managing those two, and it is difficult sometimes. You want everything right now, trust me, like you really do. But you got to make sure that you're making sound decisions so that you can stay healthy and stay in a position to sustain success over a long period of time.
Greg, I mean, that response to me is a GM 101, but also it should be a placard on every Bears fan's home, for sticking to the plan, continuity. It's the recipe for sustainable success, and fans who want to sign Josh Jacobs now are out of their minds.
Why would you want to sign Josh Jacobs? You've got a good running back room. Why do you need him?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
It really, I mean, he's not upgrading you very much at all, if at all.
Mm-hmm.
The running back group the Bears have is pretty damn good now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll match it up against anybody in the league. Do you have Henry? No. So what? But you've got guys who are all different kinds of skill sets that are pretty darn good players. The thing that sticks out with that comment, and I like it because it is hard to adhere to a plan. You do got to keep reminding yourself, because you can get excited. And he said some other things that weren't in that clip too about, somebody asked about bringing in an older player. And I'm reading between the lines here. He says, I don't have a problem with doing that, but I don't want it to take away from the big picture, meaning the overall plan. So what does that say, reading between the lines? It says I'll give an older guy a 1-year deal,
right,
if he's going to help us now, but I'm not going to give him a multi-year contract because there's guys I got to take care of. And if you look at the way he's drafting premium positions with the premium draft picks. Okay. And that's how he wants to build his team. People are going to say, oh, Bowers, they might be able to get Bowers next year. It's not happening, especially after they just re-signed Kmet, but it wasn't happening before. If you look at the big main position that he hasn't drafted yet, it's edge. Right. And I'm sure he wanted to draft one this past April, but if you look at how the draft fell, by the time they got to that pick in the second round, there wasn't any available. They were gone. And that's the way it falls. So they took 2 defensive tackles. They tore up the defensive tackle position, and you brought in a free agent who's still young enough to produce and be a hell of a run stopper. So now, and it helps. And remember this has a lot to do with how you manage your cap. I'm going to say next year they're drafting 2 defensive ends high. And now you're bringing premium round players into drafting premium position players in the premium rounds. Right. That's kind of hard. That's a tongue twister. But you're spreading it out a little bit because you're doing a little bit each year, and it helps your cap situation. So now just think about this. You've got next year, let's say I'm correct, and they draft, I'm not saying 2 number 1s, but I'm saying 2 out of the first 3 are going to be defensive ends. You're going to have a whole defensive line that's in the first or second year. And you've got, what are the 2 premium positions on the offensive line? The 2 tackle positions. You got a second-year guy and a rookie. If they're doing it, that's this plan. It's real simple to look at. All you got to do is, just open your eyes and see it. It's really, really plain.
Yep. And frankly, I think, the plan, you can apply that to like all aspects of life. When you're planning out your life, your monthly budget, your vacations and stuff. If you take that approach of, okay, let's just do what we can, then you'll stay out of debt. you'll stay out of trouble. It's to me, it's just, I was really struck by how he laid that out there. I thought it was perfectly said. Now, another thing that struck me was when he was asked about acquiring a defensive end. He had been talking about it openly to the media in the months prior. And so he was asked about it yesterday. This is his response. I actually conjoined two different sound bites here.
See, there's no certainty of it takes, two to make sure that it works out. So there's a level of patience that comes with it. So there's no guarantee. If not, no, I'm excited about the guys that are here. Walker's done a great job. Robinson's coming along. Gibson's coming along. So that's another beautiful thing about this game is, everything right now is on paper, but there's guys that we have high expectations for that are on our football team that we hope to develop and take that role. But at the same time, we're always going to search to improve our roster. So if it's a defensive end or any position that we think can enhance our team, we're going to stay after them and stay engaged and see if we can improve our team that way.
There you go. I mean, it takes two to tango, right, Greg?
That was the key word. It takes two. In fact, I had tweeted that out a couple times in the last couple of weeks. You can't make a deal unless the other side wants to make a deal with you.
Right.
Okay. It's not, people are, well, you got the money, pay him. No, it doesn't work that way. He has got a figure in his head. And a lot of this is Cliff Stein too, with all the research Cliff does. But it's, okay, look at it. If we sign Yannick Ngakoue, this is what he is worth to us. And this is the maximum we're going to pay him.
Right.
Okay. And until they get to that figure, they're not going to overpay. It's the same thing in when they were in free agency. There's players that they like that they would have liked to sign. They walked away from because the price got too high. McGlinchey was one. And as it turns out, probably for better. They didn't mind paying the average McGlinchey got. They looked at the signing bonus and said, no frickin' way. Because then if he doesn't work out, you got a lot of dead money because of that big signing bonus. So and then it turns around, they draft Wright, who probably is going to be a better damn player anyway. And he's 7-8 years younger. So I totally get what he's trying to do. And the first, when he was talking about age, the first player I thought about was Justin Houston. Okay. Poles knows him well from the days in Kansas City when he was a all-pro defensive end. Flus knows him well. He played for Flus for 2 years in Indianapolis and averaged, I think, 9.5 sacks the 2 years there. And last year, where you look, he played 44% of the downs and still had 9.5 sacks. So his production per the play time was actually excellent. So, and what he's going to cost less than half of what Ngakoue is going to cost.
Yeah.
So Ngakoue, I figure it's got to cost $8 million at least. I don't think they'd go 8.5. 8 to 8.5 is what it's going to be. Looking at different contracts that people got. Dwayne Smoot, he doesn't have the sack production. I'll give you an interesting stat. We might have said this before. Ngakoue is one of only 6 or 7 players in the history of the league that have 8 sacks in their first 7 every year of the first 7 years of the league.
Whoa.
Minimum 8 sacks.
Yeah. That's impressive.
He's got consistency year after year after year. That, like I said, there's only 6 or 7 players in the league that have ever had that consistency. So that is worth something. People think he's a one-trick pony. That's not true, because if you look at his play time has averaged better than 70% of the defensive snaps throughout his career. I think he's only had 1 year where he was under 70. But then you said Justin Houston. Last year he played for total over the last 2 years like $6 million or something. Total. So you got to say, okay, we can get him. 3.5 million. What's he worth in the locker room? Because that's going to play into it too.
Good point.
And so, I mean, personally, I'd rather have the younger guy. But when you know that no matter who they sign of these two, it's a 1-year deal. And they're going to be gone next year because they're going to replace them with draft choices. Now, to get to the other thing, he mentioned they got high expectations. Let's take Walker first.
Okay.
And Walker's been posting a bunch of videos on Instagram and stuff. I don't know if you've seen them, but it looks like he's trimmed down. He played at about 275. Now, what you see in the media guide and what they really are often two different things. They don't always put the real weight, but they got the real weight, and those players had a reporting weight. When they came in yesterday, we've talked about this before, but I'll reiterate it. You've got two things you had to meet: a weight, a certain weight, and a certain percentage of body fat. Now, there is a little give and take. If you're heavier, but you meet the body fat requirement, you're good. Okay, but if you're heavier and you don't meet the body fat requirement, it costs you money now. You get fined on a daily basis for being overweight. So it's important. And, for the guys that are, some if they're drastically overweight, they won't let him pass the physical. And he's going to be gone. That wasn't the case here with anybody, but I've seen it in other years that happens. They hold him out because they think he might, he could get hurt or something. Then you're stuck paying him for the whole year.
Right. Back to Ndakwe here. I did a little research and looked at some of the interviews he's done since the end of the season. And one of the things that really struck me is, yes, he wanted to play for a contender, although now he has changed that and says, I just want to go to a team.
He wants a job.
Exactly. But one of the things that he is really focused on, he wants a multi-year contract. Because he has said, I want to settle down in the city, start to raise a family, start to settle down. That's really important to me. And perhaps that's why he hired Drew Rosenhaus to get him that multi-year contract. Now, a lot of agents in this league. How would you describe Drew Rosenhaus as an agent?
Bigsy said it real well when we had Bigsy. He's a deal maker. He's not a hard guy to get along with. He's he wants to make deals, but he wants to make a fair deal. But he knows where it's eventually going to go to. And granted, excuse me, the kid can say, hey, I want a 2-year deal. Right now, we're getting there August 1st. I don't think a multi-year deal is on the table anywhere.
Interesting.
Okay. I could it? Yeah, it could be. But when's the last time you saw a guy off the street get a multi-year deal in the end of July, beginning August? Besides, no, I can't think of any.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there probably are. I just cannot think of any right now. So now, could you give a guy, a veteran who gets cut, and because he's a vested veteran, he immediately becomes a free agent, and you like that guy, could you give that guy a multi-year deal? Yeah, you could do that, but it's a different situation.
It's unlikely. It's unlikely that a productive edge rusher is going to be available like that. I can't, to your example just there, though, Mark Slauson, who was cut by the Green Bay Packers and then was signed by the Chicago Bears to a multi-year contract to help solidify that offensive line. This is some 10 years ago. That's a perfect example. Yeah, but there isn't going to be a quality edge rusher. The only quality edge rushers that I foresee being available are Houston and Ndakwe. And so a quick question for you, Greg. Could the Bears perhaps do a creative approach if he wants a multi-year contract, just front load a 2 or 3 year contract for Ndakwe with an easy out after 1 year?
It's funny because I texted a guy that is real familiar with contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get off the show, I'll tell you who. Just the other day, and basically asked that question.
Okay.
Basically worded it. Could you do a 1-year deal? In basketball, you see a lot of deals with a option for the second year,
mm-hmm.
and the option could be the player's option, the team's option, or both
mm-hmm.
for the next year.
Uh-huh.
And this guy said, well, yeah, technically you can do it, but nobody's going to. You might do it for a 3 or 4 year deal, but you're not going to do it because if the guy doesn't produce, you're not going to bring him back anyway.
Yeah, right. Well, a lot of decisions to be made, but we know that Ryan Poles.
I want to get back to one other thing though, because he brought up, they got expectations for some guys.
Yes, great.
And those are in particular Gibson and Dominic Robinson. I watched a video of Robinson, and he is, to me anyway, to my eye, looks stronger,
mm-hmm.
bigger in the lower body, and really moves around well. Now, he's going into his second year, and he should take a jump. And it was interesting is that in this video, and it was like a 25-minute video, and it wasn't put out by the Bears, that
John says, I bet Greg's contract guy's first name is Cliff.
don't count on it.
A good poker face there.
So
just kidding.
I lost my train of thought because of that. No, but anyway, he was talking about what he wants to do, and he said, the league year opened last year, mm-hmm. and he goes against San Francisco, and he goes, I have 1.5 sacks in the first game, and he goes, one of the sacks was against the best tackle in football, and the other one was against McGlinchey, and he goes, I'm thinking this is going to be easy, and he goes, I didn't get any the rest of the year, and
that's right.
He said around mid-season it just hit him. He goes, I got to ask more questions. I got to ask why.
Yeah. Good.
And he basically, lack of a better term, tore himself down and, went to the coaching staff. What am I doing wrong? And what he said, and I'd have to go back and look, he said, when you look at the tape, he goes, I didn't get any sacks, but from a fundamental technique point of view, he said the last 3 games of the year were the best 3 games I played all season.
Interesting. Okay. Let's go back and take a look at those. I will, and I'm sure some other members of the Barroom team will do that as well.
But he means some like setting the edge, playing the run,
right,
doing everything right, using his hands, everything, the whole gamut. And but he's ready to play, and part of this he was talking about his evolution from going from receiver to defensive end. And don't forget, this now will be his 4th year playing on the defensive side of the ball.
Jeff says he thinks Robinson will take a big step, but he's not quite as sure about Gibson. He's worried he may not have the athleticism for the position. What are your thoughts, Greg?
Oh, I think he's plenty athletic. You expected so much more last year because he had 7 sacks, but then he also had the leading sacker in the league on the other side. And so they're concentrating on stopping. And Khalil Mack was out the second half of the year. So you're concentrating on stopping Quinn, and he's left in one-on-one situations. And they did some flip-flopping, in that situation. So he's playing both sides. And obviously a different scheme. He's playing on his feet instead of with his hand in the dirt. But when you look at the numbers, he's plenty athletic. I don't know if he was quite strong enough still, and the hand use has to improve. People don't look at hand use as much as they should, but for pass rushers, it's very, very, very important. And also being able to bend is very, very important.
Huge. Huge. All right, we're going to switch gears here. Throughout the last several GTF, we've been doing positional breakdowns, and Greg has been supplying us with his thoughts on the players that the Bears have at camp, position by position. The final group that we have is the wide receiver group. We have not done them yet, so we're going to take some of these players one by one, and we'll start, of course, with the number one wide receiver, DJ Moore. Greg, what does DJ Moore bring to the Chicago Bears? What are his strengths and what are his weaknesses too? What might you be concerned about?
I wrote this in a report on a player years ago on the Pro Football Weekly thing, draft guide. And I forgot who the player was. It was a defensive lineman. And it's, and I wrote his strengths in it, and it said weaknesses. It said he doesn't have a twin brother. And
love it.
I don't know. And I've seen, I did DJ Moore when he came out, really liked him. Mm-hmm. And he had actually played better in the pros early than I ever would expected. I mean, he really set the world on fire as a rookie down in Carolina. Mm-hmm. He's capable of playing all three wide receiver positions. That he will more than likely be the Z receiver here. And what the Z receiver means is you're the, if you're in a two wide receiver set, the X is on the line of scrimmage. The Z is the old flanker.
Right.
And in this particular offense, they want a big, long guy at the X, and that's Chase Claypool, which we were talking about before. And they want a guy who can separate, good route runner who can separate, be the Z. And that's exactly what DJ does. Mm-hmm. He's got ideal size. He's 6 feet tall. He's 210 pounds. I mean, he's actually built like a smaller running back. He's put together. Mm-hmm. And if you watch his tape, when he's got the ball in his hands, he runs hard. Now, he's not an easy guy to tackle.
Right.
He's got a lot of speed. He ran a 4.42 coming out. But not only did he run a 4.42, he had I might be an inch off here, like a 40-inch vertical jump. And real long, standing long jump too. And those all correlate. Generally speaking, if a guy runs fast, he jumps well.
Right.
Occasionally, you're going to see a guy run fast who doesn't jump good. And to me, that's a little bit of a red flag because he's got speed, but he's not explosive. Uh-huh. Well, in the case of DJ, he's got speed and he's explosive because those jumps are what measure your explosiveness. And his jumps they're not good. They're outstanding. Mm-hmm. So he can get off the jam. He's a good route runner. He catches. He's a hand catcher. He's got a large receiving radius. Good runner. Excuse me. Good runner after the catch. And it's. I think it's the whole package. He's probably the best receiver they've had here since Alshon Jeffrey. Mm. And they had a pretty good receiver tandem back then. And this one I think can be. They had Marshall and Alshon. This one, not as big as those guys, but I think it can be equally as productive.
Mm-hmm. And Greg, what do you say to people who claim or contend that DJ Moore is really not a number one wide receiver in the NFL?
Well, we went through this a few weeks ago. We said that and said, well, he's not Stephon Diggs. And then we put up the numbers.
Yep.
From Stephon Diggs' first 5 years in Minnesota and who he had a quarterback versus DJ Moore's first 5 years at Carolina and who he had a quarterback, and they're identical. So why isn't he a number one?
Yeah.
And just look at his production. His production has been outstanding. And he only had a quarterback for his first year and a half.
Right, exactly. Got to account for all those little things. All right, number 2 in the depth chart. I'm going to say it's Darnell Mooney. So Darnell Mooney, a lot of people hoping that he will get a contract extension. But what are his strengths in this offense? What should be the expectations we should see out of Darnell Mooney, who's now entering his 4th year with the team?
The only weakness he had, and I emphasize had, was his body.
Yep.
He was a tiny little guy. Well, he sure as hell doesn't look like a tiny little guy now. He looks like he put on at least 10 pounds and a good 10 pounds.
All muscle, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's cut up. Who knows? You'll probably still have him listed as 178 in the program, but he's probably closer to 185, 187. He's put together. He's got long arms for a guy that's just over 5'10". He can run. I mean, he's a sub 4.4 guy, and he can jump. He's a very good route runner. Not a good, very good. And his catch radius is enormous. Now, I think what they're going to do, I think in your base sets when you're playing 3 wide, he's going to be your slot. But I also think, depending on matchups, that you'll see them mix and match between DJ and Darnell as far as who's going to be the slot and who's going to be the Z. So you might see times when Darnell's playing the Z and Moore is playing in at the slot, and some of it may have to do with what I said, matchups, and how the Bears offensive coaches look at the capability of the slot corner on the opponent. Because you want to, if you can get a mismatch, put your best receiver on their weakest. And sometimes, in some teams, the slot corner is the weakest. Weakest of the starters. So I think you're going to see that. And then, the other guy, as we've said, the X receiver is going to be Claypool.
Right.
And, I don't think you'll see Claypool moved around. You'll see the flip-flop with Mooney and Moore, but I think you'll see Claypool be strictly the X.
Okay. Well, that brings us to Chase, who made his debut with the Bears last season in the big trade, the 32nd overall pick. It ended up being the 32nd overall pick of the draft for Claypool. And let's recall that this guy had a great career at Notre Dame, and in his rookie season was on the all-rookie team after he had 889 yards from scrimmage, 11 total touchdowns, tied for the most touchdowns in a season by a rookie wide receiver since the year 2000. Chase Claypool is a very, very talented football player. Greg, your thoughts?
I agree with you. And there's a bunch of haters out there. And then what went on Sunday was total disrespect. And frankly, it pissed me off a lot because they didn't have a freaking clue what was going on. People took him being placed on PUP. And let's say this right from the beginning. He didn't even have to be in camp on Saturday or Sunday. He chose to. Okay, the veterans reported yesterday, but he hadn't taken his physical yet. And you can't go out and do anything like with that group that came in early until you pass a physical. When he passed a physical, he's taken off the list. It's real simple. But you saw some of the stuff. There were so many people on talk radio that spent segment after segment after segment trying to bury this guy when they didn't have a fucking clue what they were talking about. One being Danny Parkins. And Danny Parkins brings this a-hole from Pittsburgh, who's his buddy, from college, Andrew Filipponi. Filipponi says, this guy can't run. He never ran fast at Notre Dame. Well, that guy must have never seen him. And the correlation that I said between the jumps and speed? He ran 4.42, and he had a 39.5 vertical jump. Those correlate. He's a fast guy. And yeah, 10-6 standing long jump. He's a very, very talented guy. When he went to Notre Dame, he's from Canada. He's from British Columbia. And so obviously he played against weak competition as compared to, American football, high school football players. So he was, as a freshman, mainly a special teams player, but a hell of a special teams player. Like, he led Notre Dame in special teams tackles, and he played on all the cover. He was like the gunner on the punt team. You go down on the kickoff team. He played everything, and which also tells you what kind of toughness he has. But then the next 2 years, he really came out as a receiver, led Notre Dame as a receiver his junior year, and then he came out early. This guy's a quality receiver, and we've talked about it numerous times, and unless Ryan Poles was lying to me, and I know he wasn't, I had a conversation with him, and he said, and you recall this, that he goes, I know people are upset. I get it. They want it, and that's where I came up with this phrase, instant gratification. They wanted to come in and catch 30 balls in a half season and touchdown after touchdown. It doesn't work that way, especially in this offense. Teddy Monago, who was one of my scouts, now the assistant scouting director for the Rams, he called me the day the trade was made. He said, don't expect any production this year. You're not going to see it. The offense is too hard. And it's really almost the exact opposite of what he was playing in Pittsburgh and the terminology that they use in Pittsburgh and what they ask the receivers to do. It takes time. And Paul said, we expected the production when we made the trade, we expected the production to be this year, not last year. So, and he said, if I had to do it all over, it'd take me about 5 seconds to say yes. Now that's a quote. And then you see somebody on ESPN Chicago say, well, they're disgruntled. Does that sound like a GM that's disgruntled with the player? No, they made it up. Not true.
It's and I agree with Cornelius, by the way. He says he was shocked that the Bears chose Kmet over Claypool. And it's not that in the draft. And it's not that I had any dislike of Kmet. I just thought Claypool was the better player and would have been a good fit for the Chicago Bears. Nonetheless, I appreciate everything that you're saying about the media. They just tend to really overdo it a bit when it comes to criticism of players, and I wish they showed a little bit more respect.
They dwell on the negative. That's what I don't like, is dwelling on the negative, especially when they don't know the answers. Like there's also, they spent a good part of Monday just trying to destroy this kid, and like 4:00 in the afternoon it comes out, well, he's taking off pup. When they were expected that he was going to miss like weeks. And that's how they were acting. He didn't even miss a day. The first practice was today.
Right. All right, good stuff. Let's move on down this list of wide receivers as we evaluate the receivers in camp. Our next graphic includes two players, and that is Velus Jones and Tyler Scott. And the reason I listed both of these guys is because there's similarity between their styles. Would you agree with that?
I think Tyler might be a little more advanced based on the way he was used at Cincinnati.
Okay.
He's not a big guy in that he's not tall, but he's stacked up now. He's put together. He's strong. He's tough. He can really run. In fact, he only ran like 4.43. He looks like he runs 4.30 because he is a burner on the football field. He gets separation instantly. I think that he is going to be the best, because he's a rookie. He probably only play one position to start until he's real comfortable and up to speed. So I think he'll be, and I could be wrong, but I think he'll be the backup at the slot to start. and then eventually be the backup, the Z and the slot. But right now, I would say he's going to be number 4. Now, could be, you haven't put EQ up there because EQ could be 2, but EQ plays a different position. Velus obviously had a disappointing rookie year. I think it was a little bit too big for him as a rookie. And that's not unusual with receivers. Just lately, the receivers coming into the league are so advanced. He wasn't. He had flashes. Do I think he's going to be on the team? Yes. I do not think, unless he really is terrible in the preseason, I do not think he is in jeopardy of losing a roster spot this particular year. Now, after this year, you just, unless a guy is terrible, you don't cut a 3rd-round pick from the year before. You just don't do it.
Right.
You give him the opportunity to do it. If the guy stinks, then they'll bite the bullet and do it. But he doesn't stink. I just don't. What happened was he really wasn't, because he was thinking too much. He's a 4.3 guy and he wasn't playing the 4.3 speed, and that happens when you got to think too much.
Yep.
And you're not comfortable with exactly what you're being asked to do. They opened up some gadget plays for him later in the year to get the ball in his hand because that's where he's good. And he had some success doing that. So, I think that he's going to be that same kind of player this year. But I would think if you're looking at where he lines up on the depth chart, unless he really comes on, he might be 6th of 6. When they get to the 53.
Okay. One thing about Velus that a lot of people don't talk about, it was his proficiency at returning kicks. He ranked 7th in the NFL with 607 kickoff return yards. 7th. And of runs of over 20 yards, he was 6th in that category. So he immediately, proved that he can be a prolific kick returner. He just has to, of course, secure the ball better because he's had some ball security.
He had a big fumble on a muff to punt.
Right.
Where the Bears were, if I recall correctly, they were winning at that time in that game, and then immediately gave up a touchdown because of the muff punt and ended up losing the game, and that was the difference in the game. Like I said a couple minutes ago, the best thing he does is run with the ball when the ball's in his hands, and they were, obviously as a return guy, but then, he started doing some reverses, and then you get him on some bubble screens because it's just you just got to catch the quick pass and then start running, get him in space because that's what he does. So if you want to say that's a gadget guy, that's what he is. And I think until he proves otherwise, and he could, take the big second-year jump, I think he'll be a gadget guy. And I think that when you look at the other guys on the roster, he's going to be, I think they keep 6 and he'll be 6th of 6.
Bellissimo asks, who will win the returner job, Ebner or Velus? And Brad Biggs, who was our guest last week, talked highly about Treston Ebner. Not that he had high expectations, but that he thought that Treston Ebner would get an opportunity to showcase his skills, particularly catching the ball out of the backfield, and to keep an eye on Treston Ebner. But when it comes to returning kicks, what do you think about Bellissimo's question? If you were to make a guess, who wins that returner job?
I'd say Velus, and I like Ebner as a returner. You go back, really, your exposure to him is going back and look at the tape when he was at Baylor. And he's another guy who can run, and he's explosive. I don't recall if he does punts. I know he does kickoffs, and he's real good at kickoffs.
Yes, he is.
But Velus can do both.
Yeah.
Now, the thing with Ebner is, and I get Biggs' thinking, but they brought in the guy from Seattle,
Mhm.
and that was a polls favorite. So, obviously he's got to play himself out of a job. So I think for that fourth running back spot, it's between Homer and Ebner for the 4 spot, if they in fact keep 4 on the 53. I think they will, but they could just keep 3, and then that fourth guy is going to be on the practice squad.
Yeah, J2K says, I don't think Velez can return punts, but that leads me to this question. What is the difference from a scout's point of view when you're looking at returners? What's the difference between a kickoff returner and a punt returner? Why can't every guy who returns kicks do both?
It's because it's an entirely different skill set. First, just fielding the ball is different. You got kickoff is for the most part, an end over end kick that's lower. It's easier to field. But you also got to be a little bit tougher runner to return kickoffs efficiently, because you got to hit that seam in the wedge real quickly. Okay, so you've got to be, I'm going to say, a little bit more explosive at the beginning of the run. You got to get up through that first pack of defenders, which is, give or take the 20-yard line. And then after that, you break through that group, and then you're in the open field. The punt, obviously a lot higher. Wind has a lot of effect on the punt. The spin is totally different. So it's like a baseball player having to judge a pop, a high pop up. It's you don't judge the ball right, and in the case of his fumble, he didn't judge it right. He was back a little bit too far, and then he had to overextend to make the catch instead of having bring it in here. He was out like this. So, and that happened. So, you go back and you look at him through his career as a returner. He's been pretty good at both. I mean, I've never seen that a lot of teams have 2 different guys doing the skill set or doing the return, because it is 2 different skill sets. The best guy I've ever seen being able to do both is Devin. But then he's the best guy in the history of the game of doing it. So,
yeah. Future Hall of Famer, Devin Hester. All right, let's get back to our wide receivers. We got in this chart, Equanimous St. Brown and newly acquired Isaiah Ford. So let's begin with EQ, a 5th-year wide receiver who completed his first season with the Bears in 2022. He only had 21 receptions with the Bears and scored 1 touchdown. But again, his value was as a blocking wide receiver for this run-heavy football team and his special teams play. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, and he's the backup to Chase at the X. He fits the mold of what they're looking for at the X receiver spot. To give you an example of what the coaching staff and the front office think of EQ, they signed him to a new contract 2 days after the season ended. I mean, it was like, done. We want you back. And they knew they didn't have to do a multi-year deal. So, he got a little raise. And that was that. But that tells you that, they weren't going to let him hit free agency. They wanted him locked up. They liked the player. There's some limitations, obviously. But he's also the best blocking receiver they have. And that value on special teams, your receivers 4, 5, and 6, in particular 5 and 6, have to be valuable special teams players. They have to produce, otherwise, no sense of having them on the roster. And he can do that. He's a backup X. He plays on all the teams. He's a tough guy. He can block. He's a good person. He's a good character guy. And he's athletic too now. I mean, he was no slowpoke. He was a 4.48 or a 4.47 coming out. He's a lot faster than his brother and a lot bigger than his brother. His brother's just a better receiver.
Yeah, EQ is the kind of guy who's a great clubhouse presence. He will do the dirty work. He won't complain, and he knows this Luke Getsy offense inside and out. Now, Isaiah Ford, I actually started doing some research on Isaiah Ford, and I ran across this headline from one of the Chicago Bears fan websites. Bears get a steal in Isaiah Ford. I'm like, Jesus, this is not Jesus Christ. It's a journeyman football player who didn't see a single snap of football last season, despite the fact that he was injury-free. But nonetheless, it was interesting that they brought him in before taking Chase Claypool off of PUP. So, because that had us all wondering, well, is Chase's injury more serious? Why do you think they brought in Isaiah Ford? And do you think there's any chance he catches on with the Bears?
Another catch on? No. Another camp body.
Okay. Yeah.
You gotta have a certain amount of guys to play the position in training camp because you're throwing the ball all the time. But when you go through the different periods, and you don't want guys running 2 plays in a row, so you need 11 or 12 receivers on your roster to start off camp. And I don't know what the number is for the Bears, but I bet you it's pretty damn close to that. Number 2, the last thing on him, they want speed. God didn't give him speed. He ran 4.6 and change when he came out. So
4.6, my goodness. That is not. Levante says that Ford will be a practice squad player. I'm not sure he has eligibility. I'm not sure how that rule is.
You can put. You have a limited number of veterans that you can put. I don't even think he's a practice squad guy myself. Okay. Now, do I know him well enough to say that? No. But, I look at the natural traits. I just don't see it. He was out on the street as a wide receiver. Everybody has close to a dozen wide receivers in camp. So if you're out of, it's not like you got a dozen defensive ends.
Right.
Okay. But you got that many wideouts because they're needed in camp. And if you're still out on the street, it's not saying a whole lot about you. I mean, there are a couple guys that I think got a chance for the practice squad, but he isn't one of them until he proves differently.
Yep. Here are 2 good candidates for the practice squad, Nasimba Webster and Doris Fountain. I want to start with Fountain first because last year when the Bears were in need of trying to add some wide receivers, and I knew, there wasn't going to be anyone available via trade. This was after they acquired Claypool. I looked at the practice squad for the Kansas City Chiefs and found the name Doris Fountain. I did some research on him. He's a big, tall, strong wide receiver who's like EQ. Yeah.
Yeah, he's another expert. He doesn't run that well. He's another guy who runs 4.6. But real good camp guy. I personally, I think Webster's got a better chance. You're probably going to have at least 2 receivers on the practice squad. For the same reason. You're throwing all the time. You need a bunch of guys. So, but the guy, and you'll get to him, that I think, just based on what I saw and looking at his raw traits, is I don't even know if I know how to say his name. Cyric.
I got him here. Hold on. Cyric Pitts.
But he's a 4.4 guy. He's big. He's raw. Played at Delaware, but there's some talent there.
Yeah. Well, he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. And I left Dante Pettis off this list because he was placed on the active non-football injury list late yesterday afternoon, after Poles met with the media and said everybody is fine.
Well, obviously he had something that happened between the end of OTAs and now. That's why it's non-football injury. So that's like PUP, though. You can be on NFI for 1 day or 2 days.
Okay.
Okay. Or you could, there's no, once the season starts, then you go on. There's preseason PUP, preseason NFI.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you count against the 90-man roster, and you just can't practice until you're cleared.
Right.
Okay. Once you get to the final cut down, and if you get put on NFI, then you're out a minimum 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with PUP. Now, the one thing with PUP, you only go on PUP at one time, and that's the very first day. You can't have a guy practice for 2 days and then go on PUP.
Okay.
It's got to be.
I didn't know that.
You got to. You cannot. The reason you're put on PUP is you haven't been cleared to play.
Mm-hmm.
Originally. Once you're cleared to play, you can never go on PUP again in that particular year.
All right. That's out of the way. Son says Pitts is interesting. Guy has great hands, decent size. He's a good possession wide receiver. I've asked people for final questions. Let's field some of the ones we already have here. Son Torres wants to know, can you please ask Greg if the both of us can do 2 days, 2 shows a week? You guys needed, brother, we're needed. We provide some common sense for Bears fans, led by you, of course. We have to talk about that, Greg. Maybe we should do 2 shows a week during the season. It'd be fun. Of course, that means more money, right? You saw it.
Don't make me start coughing.
BAWJ, Bruce, Ali, Walter, Jordan says the wide receiver room assessment in general. So, in general, I got to tell you, I'm impressed by this wide receiver room. It's one of the best in years. What's your overall sense of the wide receiver
I agree. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I know one thing. It's one of the fastest in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Top to bottom, it might be the fastest in the league. No, they don't have a guy as fast as Tyreek Hill.
Mm-hmm.
But of the 6 that'll be on the roster, all 6 are sub 4.5. All 6 are sub 4.47, 4.48, with EQ being the slowest guy.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got Claypool's 4.42, Scott's 4.43. These are combine numbers. DJ Moore's 4.42, Mooney's 4.37. Valus is like 4.32.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fast freaking guy. Pettis was a 4.44,
Mm-hmm.
and he might not make the team.
That's right. Yeah. Pettis, people forget, is quite the burner. He's selected out of the 2nd round, so there were higher expectations for him.
I'll tell you, his tape in college was really good.
Yeah, we're very good. Daniel says that he empathizes with you because he had congestive heart failure, so he takes 2 water pills every day and something called Xarelto to prevent a stroke. I can't wait.
Wow.
I can't work my regular job.
Sorry.
Yeah. So his situation.
No, my thing is just it flares up every once in a while, and actually, I didn't know why. For the people listening, Aldo before we went on said could be the air quality, and I never thought about that.
Mm.
And you're probably 100% right. There's all that shit in the air right now, and there has been, and that's about when this started to act up.
Yeah. I bet it is definitely that. All right, some more questions here. Bush wants to know, what are your thoughts about the defense? How much will it improve this year? That's almost a softball question because you could say a lot and they could then be in the middle of the league because being the worst to the middle
go down. So
exactly.
No, I think they're going to be a lot better. If you look at, they haven't added that dangerous pass rusher, so to speak. Could they have one on the roster? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to develop. But the people they've added in the veteran free agency area, Green, Walker, guy from the Raiders, Biggins, is they're all really good run defenders.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the run defense is going to be way better. The interior pass rush is going to be way better. The linebacker play, I'll tell you, it surprised me they cut Weatherford yesterday because they liked him.
Yeah.
But that tells you what they think of the group. It's pretty darn good. And you know, there's really only two starters. The way that they play defense now, you got a Mike and a Will. Very rarely do you play some downs with a Sam, yeah, but not that much. So the Sam linebacker has to be able to back up at Mike. He has to be able to back up at Will. And when he gets an opportunity to play with three, you know, when they play with three linebackers, he'll get a snaps. But the number of snaps where that happens is, you know, at most 20%. And if Flus had his way, it'd be more like 15%.
Levante has asked this question a couple of times, and it's a great question. I want to make sure I get it in. He says, what do you look at attentively when you are scouting wide receivers? And has it changed over the years? As scouting wide receivers changed over the years? And what are the keys that you look at when evaluating a wide receiver?
Well, that could take an hour. Wide receivers are very easily overrated because you get a lot of guys, the way offenses are built in college. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them aren't very difficult, but they spread things out. And colleges, for the most part, their weakest position is DBs and corners. Mm-hmm. They just don't have enough. So you got things spread out. There's some of these offenses where a receiver might only run 3 routes. His whole route tree might consist of 3 routes. So what I'm trying to say is you got to look at a number of things. First of all, does he have the natural traits? Mm-hmm. Speed and quickness, body control. Does he break down when you're watching him run routes? Is he upright, or can he break down going into the cut and coming back out? Does he have a really good burst coming out of the cut? And does he retain that good body control? Is he a hands catcher? In other words, is he catching the ball away from his body, not in here? Mm-hmm. Then you look at what he's being asked to do. Now, you can't penalize him because he's got a limited route tree, but you have to note it because the learning curve for that guy is going to be a lot more than somebody who comes from a more sophisticated offense. Mm-hmm. So, and you can put the tape on, you could say, you know, you see one guy, he lines up consistently on the right side and he runs maybe 3 routes. You see him run deep, you see him run a slant, you see him run a hitch. That's all they do every single play. You know, so they could catch a number of balls, but their offense is so limited in what they're being asked to do, it makes it a little bit harder to project. Mm-hmm. So that's where interviews, getting a guy on the board, finding out his intelligence factor, that's where a lot of that stuff comes into play. But with me, the big things you say, I always write down if he plays in a limited offense, you know, meaning his route tree is small, right. But he's got to have the natural traits. He's got to be able to catch the ball and not only catch the ball, courage. Will he catch the ball in traffic?
Right.
If I see a guy who won't go into traffic, I bury him.
Yeah.
But that's me. I mean, you know, different people might not do that, but that's tight to me. If you can't catch the ball in traffic, how do you expect to play in the National Football League? Because you are going to get killed.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about all those traits, Greg, can you apply those? You can apply all of those to Velus Jones and the limited, pass receptions he had at Tennessee. Is that fair to say?
Well, he had 50-something, I think, it was last year, but it was the only year that he really had the great production.
Right.
He was always a return guy.
Mm-hmm.
I think when it gets down to, they really looked at the traits, the speed. He was the fastest receiver in the combine that year.
Mm-hmm.
And, they looked at that and they were impressed with him in the interview, and they said, we can do this, this, and this. They could have been wrong. Or maybe it's just going to take an extra year. I mean, it doesn't help that he's already 26, but that doesn't bother me because, receivers don't get beat up like running backs do.
Right.
So,
yeah. Cornelius says, I'd rather have Velus than Jordan Addison.
I like Jordan Addison. I'm not going to. What surprised me about Jordan Addison is he didn't run fast, because he sure as hell plays fast.
Yeah, it surprises me that he drives so fast just before training camp. What a knucklehead!
Then he was
All right.
taking his dog to the vet. That's a pretty emergency situation. And he did have the dog with him.
He did.
He had the dog with him.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right.
he said the dog was going through an emergency, and he called the emergency vet, and he was trying to get there as fast as he could.
Oh, well,
Now, could that have been true? Could have been, but who the hell goes 140?
Yeah.
Well, he had a Lamborghini or something, so I guess,
I hope the dog survived the traffic stop. All right, let's get a few more in here. Bellissimo wants to know your starting and offensive defensive lines. Of course, it's going to be Braxton Jones, left tackle. It's going to be Tevin Jenkins at left guard. It's going to be Cody Whitehair at center. It's going to be Nate Davis at right guard, and it will be Darnell Wright, who, by the way, got accolades from General Manager Ryan Poles yesterday at the press conference about how hard he's worked, that he's dropped a lot of weight, as you predicted he would, and that his body fat is at an excellent shape. But what I would like
Ryan
to know,
Poles' boy now.
Yes, he is.
That's his boy. He's hanging his hat on that guy.
Indeed. So what I would like to know is Bellissimo's second part of his question. What is that first rotation at the defensive line going to look like? What would you predict there?
I think we talked about this. I'm unsure if guessing, I would say, well, let me back up a little bit. Who starts and who doesn't start doesn't matter. It's how many snaps you're getting.
Yes.
Okay, because they're going to play a rotation. So looking at the interior, I would think the prudent thing to do was, you got two rookies and you got two veterans. So you would line up a rookie and a vet instead of having two rookies and two vets and in there at the same time. So now, could I be totally off on that? Absolutely. But that's just my thinking. So you've got at least some experience in there all the time. Now, who it ends up being, you're going to have Big Andrew in there at nose tackle. So is it going to be him and, say, Zach Pickens, and then Jones and Gervon Dixon? You think, could be. Because I think Gervon is going to be, or Dexter. I said Dickens. I'm not Dexter. Gervon, I think, is going to be starting off as the nose. And, your threes will be Pickens and Jones. And then your nose will be Andrew and Gervon. So as far as the ends, Walker will be one. I think he'll be on the left side, not the right. I think the right end isn't on the team yet. Unless Dominique Robinson really takes off. Now, he was starting at the end of last year. But, if you bring in Ngakoue or Houston, one of those guys will be your starter
Okay.
at the end spot.
Well, let's hope that happens quickly because we'd like to see him in camp. All right.
Let me say this. They could bring that guy in 2.5 weeks before the season starts and he'd be fine. It's the easiest position to get the guy acclimated. Don't forget, go back to 18 when they traded for Khalil Mack.
Mm-hmm.
He was never in camp that year, and that trade was made 8 days before the opening game.
Great point.
Okay, so these are veterans. They're working out all the time. They're keeping themselves in shape. In the case of Houston, he has played in the exact scheme. He played for Flus for 2 years, so he knows the scheme. And in the case of Ngakoue, he's played in a similar scheme. There might be a little bit of terminology difference, but the basic job is the same. Get the freaking passer.
That's it. Get the quarterback and hurt him badly. Danger T wants to know, on the first day of training camp, can you tell right away if you have a good team? If not, how long does it take?
Well, right now and for the next week, because I said the first day of pads is next Wednesday,
right?
Which is long. It used to be like you do 3 days of OTA type practice and then you get into pads. I don't know why it's a week now. We might have to end this pretty soon, buddy.
Okay.
But right now they're not playing football yet. It's OTA practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's more contact, so to speak, than you had in OTAs, because in OTAs you're not allowed to touch a guy, supposedly. Well, now you can. Camp's open. You can touch the guy. But, the coaches are going to set limits on it because you're still not in pads.
Indeed. All right. I'm going to leave it there so that way you can rest up those lungs. I've kept you well over time, 1 hour and 50 minutes just about. So I'll let you go. And we had 2 or 3 other questions. J2K, your question about pre-snap movement, and Mr. Englewood, your question about Lovie Smith. Great questions. And then this real quick.
What were about Lovie?
The Lovie, when Lovie came to Chicago, he took the Bears to the Super Bowl after year 3. Are we on the same schedule, timetable in 2023? I like the question.
That's a good question. Could be. I mean, we had to totally redo the defensive line in year 1 because we had nobody who could, except Alex Brown, who could play in this scheme.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to go out and get players. And over the first couple of years, we accumulated them. We got, Tank and Tommy Harris year 1 in the draft. I think at some positions the Bears are better than that team was right now at the personnel. Offensive line on those teams are pretty damn good. So I don't think they're as good as the offensive line was. But I think you got to wait and see. Who knows? We'll know by the end of the season. And you froze, Aldo. Okay. Aldo lost power for some reason. So I'm going to take it upon myself, because he can't talk and you just see his ugly face sitting there on the screen, to sign off. So thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back next week. I'm not sure if it'll be Monday or Tuesday, but it'll be one of those days. Take care. Have a good week.
I'm not sure if anyone is still alive with us, but I lost complete power in the entire house for like 2 seconds. Of course, there's been some terrible storms, and I'm sure that was probably the cause of it. But so I apologize for the abrupt end of the show. If anyone is still out there alive, I want to let people know that, let me see here. There's a couple of messages here that Facebook is no longer carrying us, but just want to let people know that at 2:00 today, Bardon Talking Hockey with Vinny Parisi and Frank Mueller. They will, of course, go over the Rocky Wirtz passing. Hey, Swifty. And Mike North and I talked about Rocky Wirtz last night on his show called Somebody Big Just Died. But the younger guys, Frank and Vinny, will talk about Rocky Wirtz's death, and so that should be interesting to watch. And they'll also talk about pop culture, some of the latest movies that are out. And I'm not sure they experienced the Barbie Oppenheimer or whatever the hell that's called, where you watch the Barbie movie and then watch the Oppenheimer thing. But stay tuned for that. And then at immediately after Bardon Talking Hockey, Vinny is going to do about 30 minutes on Crosstown Crosstalk talking about the Cubs and Sox. So we got a lot of stuff today and in the days to come. Tomorrow at 8 p.m., a special Dan and Aldo. Devin Aromashadu, a former Chicago Bears wide receiver, will be our guest, and we'll have lots of fun stuff at tomorrow, 8 p.m. Central. Hey, Notorious TBG. Man, that was a weird thing, man. I am watching the screen, and all of a sudden, black. I mean, everything went off. And so it took me about 15, 20 minutes to get back on after power was restored. So really appreciate you guys sticking around. This show will be available on demand. I'm going to post it. I'm going to edit out all this crap on the audio version of it and post it on the audio podcast version so that you can listen to it on the drive. Where are you, Notorious? There you go. Rest in peace, Rocky. He saved the Blackhawks and took them from the worst professional sports team to one of the best. You are so right about that. One of the things that Mike North and I talked about was, William Wirtz, his father, Rocky Wirtz's father, was just awful in terms of how he ran the organization. And Rocky was taking notes as a kid growing up and had his opinions on things. And according to Mike, William Wirtz would throw his son out of meetings for speaking up with radical ideas like, showing the games on television, home games on TV. Wow, what a concept. But as soon as Rocky took over, he brought the team back into the 21st century, brought the team to the 21st century and hired some really good people. And they won 3 Stanley Cups. And there are a couple of blemishes in his career. And I think Vinny and Frank will talk about that at 2 p.m. on Bardon Talking Hockey. But outside of those blemishes, Rocky was a great ambassador. If you would see him at the United Center, and if you wanted to take a picture with him, he would just turn around, pose for the camera, put his arm around you. Just a really good guy. He passes away at the age of 70, and our condolences to the Wirtz family. So you are so right there, Notorious. He really did bring some championships to Chicago. As a good guy. So with that, we'll do the official close right now. We'll roll the closing video and ask you all to keep Barroom Network in mind when you're searching for some sports news entertainment. Take care, everybody.